Once upon a time there was a young boy named Jack who lived in a small village at the edge of a deep, dark forest. One sunny morning, Jack decided to take a walk through the lush green woods surrounding his home. As Jack strolled along the shady forest path, he daydreamed about finding buried treasure or having amazing magical adventures. He imagined playing with friendly elves and fairies who lived in the woods. Lost in his imaginings, Jack didn't pay attention to where he was walking and soon came to a fork in the path. Unsure of which way to go, he chose the path on the right just for fun. The farther Jack walked down the right-hand path, the thicker the woods became. Huge, ancient trees blocked out most of the sunlight, and it grew eerily quiet since even the birds stopped singing. Strange shadows played across the mossy ground. Starting to feel nervous, Jack looked over his shoulder and was shocked to realize he could no longer see the fork in the path. Turning in circles, Jack searched for any landmarks or clues to point him back home, but everything looked the same. He was lost in the deep, enchanted forest. Jack tried not to panic. Remembering the fairy tales his mother had told him, he knew forests like this were full of magic. Perhaps he would meet a friendly talking animal or a fairy who could help guide him out of the woods. Feeling a little better, Jack followed a narrow trail leading between the trees until he arrived at a small, sun-dappled meadow. With a sigh of relief, he recognized the meadow's location. This was close to the heart of the forest, and now he could find his way back. As Jack entered the meadow, he noticed a ring of large mushrooms in the grass. They glowed faintly, as though lit from within by magic. Curious, Jack walked up to examine the mushrooms. They were unlike any he had seen in the forest before. As soon as Jack stepped inside the fairy ring, the ground dropped away beneath his feet, and he fell down into darkness. Jack yelled as he plummeted into the inky blackness. It felt like the fall lasted forever. With a sudden thump, Jack landed on a soft, mossy surface in a cavern deep underground. Glowing crystals clinging to the cavern walls provided a soft blue-green light. Shaken from the fall, Jack groggily sat up and looked around. The cavern was gigantic, with glittering stalactites hanging from the ceiling like crystal chandeliers. Ahead of Jack was an archway leading into another chamber carved from stone. Rubbing his head, Jack got to his feet and walked through the archway. He couldn't believe his eyes when he entered the next cave. A bustling underground village was spread out before him. Strange little houses made of stone and crystal dotted the cavern floor, and a babbling stream flowed through the middle. The villagers milling about looked like humans, only much smaller, with mossy hair and clothes made of leaves and petals. Jack gasped when he realized where he must be. This was a village of forest gnomes deep beneath the woods. Hearing Jack's loud gasp, several gnomes looked up in surprise. Then a crowd gathered around him, staring and whispering in their strange, gurgling gnome language. "Welcome, young human," one finally squeaked in accented but understandable words. "I am Noodle, leader of the forest gnomes. Who are you, and how did you find your way down here?" Too stunned to speak, Jack just stared with his mouth hanging open. Giggling, the gnomes crowded even closer around their unexpected visitor. Snapping out of his shock, Jack managed to stammer, "I'm Jack. I live in the village near this forest. I was exploring the woods up above and fell down that big hole into your village." The gnomes nodded knowingly. "The ring of magic mushrooms is one of our doorways between the surface world and our underground kingdom," Noodle explained. "You must have stumbled through it by accident. We rarely get human visitors." Jack felt relieved to meet such friendly creatures after his scare in the forest. Noodle invited Jack to stay for dinner in the village, and he happily accepted. The gnomes prepared a feast of juicy mushrooms, jewel-toned flower salads, and crystallized fruit. Over this yummy meal, the gnomes told Jack tales of their ancient civilization and all the magic in the deep forest. Jack described his own life in the human village for the curious gnomes. After dinner, Noodle had an idea. "Young Jack, would you like to see how we gnomes travel through these underground tunnels?" he asked. When Jack agreed enthusiastically, Noodle whistled. Two giant rabbits with shiny fur bounded into the village. Jack's mouth fell open again in shock. He had never seen such enormous animals. Laughing at Jack's stunned expression, the gnomes helped him climb onto one of the rabbits' backs. The soft, warm fur tickled Jack as the giant rabbits bounded through stone tunnels. They leaped easily over underground streams and skidded around tight corners with Jack holding on tightly. Glowing crystals lit the rabbit's path through the inky darkness. Just as Jack started to relax and enjoy the incredible ride, he jerked forward, tumbling head over heels onto cold stone. Sore from his fall, Jack sat up and found himself alone in a new cave with the rabbits nowhere in sight. Icy cold water dripped from the jagged ceiling. Jack shivered, suddenly reminded of his dangerous predicament. He was still lost deep below the forest in an underground maze. Bravely choking back tears, Jack began walking down the only tunnel leading out of the cave, hoping it would somehow lead him back above ground. As Jack stumbled through the gloom, he noticed the walls glistening in places with frost. The air grew colder with each step until Jack could see his breath. Just as he considered turning back, the tunnel opened into a stunning cavern filled with shimmering pools and huge cliffs of ice. Sliding down an icy slope, Jack gaped at the magical frozen world around him. Perhaps the rabbits had led him to the gnomes' winter kingdom. Wandering through the icy cavern, Jack marveled at the gleaming ice sculptures formed by drips from the ceiling over centuries. He crossed a frozen bridge over an underground ice river. In the distance, Jack spotted wisps of welcoming firelight. With frozen fingers, Jack hurried toward the warm glow until he arrived at a cluster of tiny igloos. Kind rosy-cheeked creatures dressed in fuzzy parkas waved at Jack. "Hello, young man, and welcome," one said warmly. "I'm Snowflake, leader of the winter gnomes." Relieved to find more friendly forest folk, Jack entered the cozy igloo village. The winter gnomes offered hot cocoa, blankets, and a seat by a warm campfire. They told tales of creating gorgeous ice sculptures with their frosty magic. Once he had thawed out, Jack asked Snowflake how to return above ground to the forest. "My family will be worried about me," he explained. Snowflake smiled kindly. "Of course, dear boy," she said. "We will guide you back through our tunnels to the surface." Jack bowed gratefully to the winter gnomes, then followed them through a maze of ice-walled passages. After walking for what seemed like miles, Jack shivered as the air grew warmer. Through an archway, he spotted green grass and sunshine up ahead. Filled with relief, Jack burst out of the dark tunnel and into the familiar sun-dappled meadow. Birds chirped overhead in the forest. With a deep breath of fresh air, Jack turned to wave farewell and thank you to the winter gnomes. But with a wink, they had already disappeared back into their icy world. Following a bubbling stream, Jack quickly found the path leading out of the forest. The trees thinned until finally Jack arrived back home to his village. His mother cried with joy and relief, hugging Jack tightly. Jack excitedly told her about all his adventures with the magical forest folks. But his mother just winked like the gnomes had done. "Surely you just dozed off for a nap in the meadow and dreamt it all, dear," she said with a smile. But Jack knew the truth. He could hardly wait for his next adventure into the deep, enchanted forest.